fabulous it was.
Great.
You know,
Let's call to order the July 26th Finance Committee meeting.
thank you.
Welcome to all.
It's right there.
Let's go around and introduce ourselves.
Yes,
Want to start, Bill?
Bill Moore, Finance Committee member.
George L. Moore, member.
Mike Koner, member.
Paul Dumars, member.
Bill McDaniel, member.
Mike Burke, CFO.
Turned up fine.
Barbara McQuinn, school board member.
Ron Haran, Treasury.
Laretha McIntyre, Treasury.
David Moore, BFM Financial Advisor.
Leanne Evans, School District Treasurer.
Rick Miller, Finance Committee. Barb? JP?
Howard, Morgan Stanley. Matthew Stansbury, Stifel. TJ Whitehouse, JP Morgan. Matt Williams, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. Monahan, Wells Fargo.
Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you very much. Approval of agenda is the first item.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? Matter approved. Approval of minutes of April 27th. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
A second. See any opposition? Item passes. Public comments. Are there any public comments? Okay. Seeing none. First item is the investment advisor contract. Leanne?
Okay, good morning, everyone, and I'd like to first thank all of you for being flexible when we switched the meeting date. There's an equipment lease we're going to talk about that's time sensitive that we'd like to move forward, so we moved the August meeting up to July, and it's summer and people have vacations, and I'm really thankful you all were available to meet today, so thank you very much. The investment advisor contract, you might remember at the last meeting we brought you an RFP, and the discussion that we had indicated we wanted to change it so that price was not part of the scoring, that we negotiate that separately, which we can certainly do as an invitation to negotiate. I'm working with purchasing on that. They're incredibly busy right now with all the work related to security and the sales tax, and we're concerned that it won't be done in time, that it won't necessarily be out and the results back. So the contract we were using was a piggyback off of the Greater Orlando Airport Authority. It was a 3-year contract with with 2 options to renew for 1 year each. We had done one of those. There's still 1 more year left on that contract. So what I'm proposing is we go ahead and extend that for 1 more year, and that way we can continue using that same contract as we move forward with the RFP process. So we're planning to take that to the school board at the August meeting. So of course I was bringing it to the Finance Committee to make sure you were all in agreement with that.
So moved.
Second.
Are we going to have anybody on that committee for the review from here?
When it goes out, I'll probably come in the next meeting and say who would like to be on the selection committee. If somebody would like to volunteer, and it's optional, we can have somebody on the committee that is scoring. We can also have somebody on the committee that is just observing. We've had some, in the past you all have voted. And if you want to do that and read and score everything, I'd love to have you a member of the committee. If you would like to just come and observe that meeting and not have to read everything, we can do it that way too. And if you all say you don't want to participate, we can do that, whatever the committee wants.
I think we customarily have somebody. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Antitrust litigation settlement.
Okay.
This news to us,
Well, we've done 3 other class action lawsuits.
Wow.
And this one came up, usually the school board receives notice, and it comes in either to Blair Littlejohn in legal or it comes to me. We didn't get any notification on this one. We actually found out about this on Friday, July 13th, and PFM called us and said, one of your derivatives is eligible. Did you apply for this? And we never received any notification. So they sent it to me Friday afternoon. The deadline to apply was Monday. So normally we bring these into the Finance Committee in advance and we take it to the school board in advance for approval. So that Friday afternoon I was emailing and calling Julianne Rico, who is our general counsel, saying, what can we do? Because there was no way to get it to the committee or to the school board before the date. So what we ended up doing was going ahead and doing it on Monday, but before we did, we sent a memo to the board, which is what's attached, and you have a copy of that. So there's a summary that I wrote up, or it came from Mike and Julianne, our general counsel's office, explaining what happened and what it was. It's a $400 million settlement that was based on the Alaska Pipeline retirement system, pension system. And there's 5 or 6 banks involved. We have one derivative that meets the timeline, and it was the constant maturity swap that was done in 2006 that was done through UBS. So specifically within the settlement, I think the agreement was $14 million for UBS. So I have no idea how much or if anything we'll get from it, but as a rule, we go ahead and toss our hat into these whenever they come up. So we've done that. It's going to the school board on August 1st for ratification. And we sent the notice to the board so they could call and say if they had a concern, but we went ahead and did that. So I like to bring it to the committee so you know and you're aware of what's going on.
What did happen? This is a constant maturity swap. This is, a basis swap, as we call them. What was the problem? Does anybody
No, it had to do with, the lawsuit had to do with allegations of rigging LIBOR, and it's the financial
What's that?
markets.
It's the LIBOR.
It's the LIBOR.
Rigging. Okay, that makes sense.
There was nothing wrong with the swap. This is one we actually made a significant amount of money on it
Yeah,
when we
that's what I
sold it.
thought.
So it worked really well. It's all about the LIBOR.
Okay, so this is a bonus.
Yes.
Okay.
If we get anything, it's a thank you very much. We'll take a little extra money out of that. I'm not sure if we'll get anything or not, but
It's not much, probably.
we always throw a hat in. So I just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of that. And if you
Good.
had any concerns, let me know.
I was just wondering what it was about. I saw it for one of the clients. Okay.
Okay.
Reimbursement, let's see.
I was
Review
just
of the-
wondering
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
if it would be enough to pay for our annual breakfast.
We usually take any money we get and we apply it towards debt service payments. So
Well,
it doesn't
if
go
it's
to
too
breakfast.
small, if it's de minimis, I think Bill's got the right idea. Okay, review of the 2019 to 2028 capital plan.
Right, okay. And every year I bring in the capital plan to the committee because the debt service is built into that, and the proceeds of debt issues are in the capital plan. So this is actually a presentation we gave to the school board on June 6th. And what I told the board is, the one thing I'll guarantee is there are going to be changes between now and adoption in September, but I don't know there's going to be significant changes. We may be moving some things around, especially with the sales tax projects. We constantly are reviewing those to see if something needs to be expedited or shifted or rearranged. So I know there's some shifts going on. When this was completed, when we prepared the document, we still hadn't closed the fiscal year. Year-end is June 30th. So interest accruals are not in, final payments. There's a lot of things still undone, but it's the capital plan, and it shows what we plan to do for the next 10 years, actually.
Now, Leanne, with this pending potential thing that could get on the ballot regarding property taxes, would that change anything?
No, not for, the constitutional amendment regarding property taxes, the school districts are exempt from that. They're not part of it. So it would impact cities and counties and special districts probably, but it doesn't impact school districts. We're specifically excluded. So the capital plan, we're required to do a 5-year plan. We'll go to the board for adoption on September 5th, just prior to adoption of the budget. We've expanded ours to a 10-year plan, so we did it, actually, it was 11 years the year we did the sales tax. We wanted to incorporate the entire life of the sales tax. And now that we've got a 10-year plan, we're just keeping it that level because it's very helpful, I know, and for me, structuring debt issues and looking at trends of what we think is going to happen, it's valuable to have it going out for 10 years. Understanding that what's in year 10 probably is not what's really going to happen when we get there, but it's a good planning tool. So we always put this in. Everything that we do is tied back to the district strategic plan. So it falls under the category of resource optimization because that's what we're looking at all of our facilities. So a few years ago, actually I think it was 2 years ago, Mr. Burke started a group that's looking strategically at all our facilities and how we're using them and making sure we're using them as efficiently as possible. And we've kind of categorized recommendations that group makes into expanding facilities, expediting projects, remodeling to serve the needs of students, or repurposing schools. So we look at the 5-year plan in that method, in that reason. That's the things we're doing. So the changes we have for this year's plan that we wanted to point out to the group, to the school board, was expanding some schools to K-8s from K through 5. So we've got 2 new schools, or replacement schools, Addison, Meisner, and Verdi, in the capital plan that are being built as K-8s. And then North Grade is an existing school that's underutilized, and we're just going to add a grade a year until it becomes a K-8. We're planning to do some additions, and you've got the 4 of them listed there. We're trying to move up O5C, and I'm going to circle back to that in just a minute. And then we're doing some remodelings, increasing the core of 8 elementaries. When we add an addition on, or we add a lot of concrete portables, temporary classrooms into a school before enrollment, we don't always increase the size of their cafeteria. So these elementary schools are running 4 and 5 different lunches, and it's just becoming a timing issue for the schools. So we're going in and expanding the size of their cafeterias and some of their what we call the core of the school.
Now you ask, it seems like very few new schools. What's the projection for new students?
Well, those were changes from last year's plan.
Oh,
so
I
this
see.
slide right here shows the new schools.
Okay,
and the one thing I wanted to point out, when we're building a new school, if it's funded with anything other than sales tax or impact fees or donations, we have to have approval from the Department of Education to build it. They look at our capacity in our schools, and they tell us whether or not we're allowed to build the schools. So there's a couple of schools in here, and specifically O5C, Triple O, which is the high school, West Lake Worth is at Lyons and Lake Worth Road, I believe. And then Sunset Palms Middle School, 17 PP, DOE has come back and said, no, you can't build a school. 2 of those are on our referendum list, but they're all planned to be funded with COPS. So in this capital plan, while we want to expedite O5C, and specifically O5C, the plan is to build that adjacent to the Don Estridge Middle School, and the city of Boca Raton is willing to give us the land for the school. So we're very anxious to build that. The elementary schools in Boca Raton are overcrowded, but DOE has indicated we should just be doing boundary changes and moving the kids. So we're still continuing to work with DOE, but we've had to move those schools all back a year because we can't finance them in FY19. DOE has not approved them. So we are continuing to work on the capital plan, and we may be making changes, if DOE changes their mind or if we can come up with a different way of presenting the data. But this is a complete list of all the addition and remodeling projects, the replacement schools that are planned, or facilities, new school, and the new schools. So there are some new schools in the capital plan.
And what's the total expected increase in enrollment, do you know?
Actually, I don't think we have expected enrollment changes, especially out west and with Westlake and some of the new developments going on. But we also, and this goes back to the point with DOE, we have a lot of empty seats as well. It's just not necessarily in the right spot. We have a lot of empty seats in the Glades. You can't move kids from Wellington and Royal Palm to Belle Glade for school. It doesn't make sense to bus kids that far. So we have open seats in some parts of the county, and in other parts of the county is growing like crazy. The center part of the county seems to be growing leaps and bounds. I think that's the lower priced properties, and people are buying there. And you also have a lot of people with young kids moving into these areas. That's what's happening in Boca. You're having a shift of people that have retired that are selling their homes, and people with young kids are moving in. So the schools are overcrowded. So sometimes it's growth due to new development, and sometimes it's just neighborhoods being revitalized and changing. But it is a challenge. I don't know that net we do have an increase in enrollment every year, a small one. But these schools are based on just shifting enrollments and things being moved around. Okay, debt service, and there's a slide here as well, but what we're doing is financing the long-term debt as well as the short-term debt. And the short-term debt we have out there are some leases, and we're going to talk more about our leases in another presentation. But we've purchased school buses and chillers on leases, which it's more like a 5-year loan. We own the buses and we own the chillers, but it's just a shorter way of financing. Instead of doing a 25-year COPS issue, we do a 5-year loan for those items. So the budget for the 10 years has got 1.6 billion in the plan, and we're breaking out previously issued debt versus new long-term debt or COPS because of some state laws where they talked about requiring us to give money to charter schools, and we were allowed to reduce the amount we had to share with them based on debt that was outstanding as of March 2017. So we're breaking out the debt into those two timelines. And then we also have the payments for the new equipment lease that's out there. So this is, I always tell the board, this is my favorite chart, and they always laugh when I say that. But this is the borrowing capacity. So we're tracking, this is something we show you as part of the annual debt report. The gray bars is the existing debt service. The blue is the proposed new money COPS. And then the red line is 50% of 1.5 mils. And I continue to always show this green line, hoping it happens one day that we get back to 2 mils. I don't know that it's going to happen, but we're going to continue to show it because that's where we should be. Not ready to let that go yet. So I'm going to go through the rest of this very quickly, but facility projects, these are the other things in the capital plan. So the biggest piece of it is facility renewal projects, the $956 million. That's all funded with the sales tax. That is the bulk of the sales tax revenue. It was due at taking care of deferred maintenance at the schools. It's roofs, it's air conditioners, it's parking lots and walls and ceilings. It's really rebuilding schools. We also have a sizable amount for classroom technology and infrastructure. There was about $100 million in the sales tax specifically for classroom technology, so that's included here. But it's purchasing computers, servers, wireless adapters. It's all the things we need to keep the technology in the classrooms. Security projects, we gave this a separate slide. It used to be on a slide shared with some other things, but security is obviously a big issue for school districts this year. And we're grateful for the fact that the sales tax included $39 million for sales tax, for security projects. So that's included. And then we've added additional money. We've got additional money in there as well. So there's $62 million for security. These sales tax projects are going to be expedited. We're moving that up to be done over a 2-year window instead of spread over 10 years so we can get all that work done at the schools. Transportation and equipment. Transportation, we have money in the capital plan, specifically in the sales tax, to buy buses over the next, I guess it's 8 more years for transportation. And then the furniture and equipment, that's, again, that number is $6 million a year, and that covers all the copy machines, desks and chairs and tables and all the things we do. There's some money in the referendum for furniture and equipment too, and that's in there. And then the other items, the property and flood insurance, money for the reserves, $259 million seems like a very large number. There's $51 million of it is specifically sales tax reserves, and the rest of it all happens in the last 2 or 3 years of the 10-year plan. There's not a big amount of reserves in the first few years. We have extra money in those last years, and by the time we get there, chances are that money will be used for something. But over the 10-year window, it's $259 million. And charter schools, this is the one that's a wait and see. This year, the legislature fully funded the money for charter schools, so none of our capital money is going to charter schools. But the law was changed so that if the state doesn't fund it, then the school district has to fund it. So for year 20 through 28, we have money in the budget earmarked for charter schools in case the state does not fund it. If the state does fund it, then we'll be revising the capital plan 1 year at a time to free that money up to use it for district needs.
Let me ask on that. Are you setting yourself up by budgeting it already rather than using your reserve?
Well, it's over 10 years, and those reserves, as I said, they're all in years 27 and 28. Mm-hmm. If we had to have money for year 20 and I didn't have it in the budget, then we'd be making cuts that would be really painful. Mm-hmm. So we'd rather be more conservative and have the money earmarked for that. And then there's never a problem finding a use for dollars. When we're doing this process, we start in January and looking at what's needed next year. Mm-hmm. I already know if that money's freed up, it's going to computers. We have a lot of computers that need to be replaced in 2020, just based on their cycling out, and that's where we already know where the money would go if it's not used for charter schools next year.
Yeah.
And the challenges, I mean, the first one is the uncertainty of the cap charter school money. We're also dealing with rising construction costs. We're seeing that throughout every bid that we have. We're not getting very many bids. I mean, the contractors are very busy, so trying to get their attention, and if they're willing to work for us. And the costs are going up. You also have the talk of tariffs on aluminum and steel. That's already the contractors are factoring that in as if it's in place, even though it's not in place. So that's another thing that's causing prices to rise. We always point out that all school construction is subject to cost per student station and DOE approval. So every project we have, we are limited as to how much we can spend on each project, and DOE has to approve them or we can't build them.
Is there inflation built into the per station
Well,
cost? Or
the state gives us
allotment?
those numbers, and the last 2 years, the numbers have gone down. So in the statute, it says it's based on CPI, and it should have inflation factored in, but the factors have gone down for the last 2 years. So
They're getting actually.
I don't think so. I think the numbers are going down, but
So there's
those numbers are set by the
There's an inflation
legislature.
factor, and it's been negative?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, those
Seem
numbers
right?
come,
They're behind up there.
yeah, they're set by the legislature.
Okay.
And so the last point I always make is, the capital budget looks big, it's getting bigger every year because of the sales tax revenues and all the work that's being done. But I like to point out that the vast majority of the plan is sales tax money, and it's on the referendum list funded with another source. It's dedicated. There's not a lot of wiggle room as to what projects we can add or change. A lot of it is set based on our commitments we made to the public with the referendum.
Mm-hmm.
So the next steps, and this is more important, the board hears this, and some of the other committees, some of this is really timely for our Construction Oversight Review Committee or some other committees, but we're looking at procedures and policies for construction to streamline processes and try to find ways to make processes go faster and reduce costs. We're looking at hiring an outside audit firm with specific construction experience that is auditing the contractor's books. We have an IG's office that does a great job at auditing what we do, but to have them actually go out and look at the contractor's books and make sure the numbers are right for workers' comp insurance and some of the other things. Other districts throughout the state have been using this for decades and have been very successful with it, so we're looking to add that on as well. It's not done, we're still working on that, but it's something that we're asking to move forward with. Working through all the logistical details. Adding a new school is very complicated with boundary changes and then adjusting staffing and placement. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So a lot of that's happening right now. And communicating this information to people, we specifically say we're going to bring it to all the oversight committees so they can see it and know what's going on. And then we'll continue the process. We have a reviewing everything every year. There's a new capital plan every year because things change and we have to address those new needs as they come up.
I don't quite understand the construction audit firm. What are you referring to?
Well, there are companies out there that specialize in auditing construction projects. They actually go and review the pay apps and the backup to make sure all the documents are right. Orange Schools has been using this. I talked to them. I remember talking to them in 2000, and they've been using them for a long time. They actually go out and they review the contracts we have for all the contractors have the option for us to audit their books. We've never done that.
But
So
you do require for requisitions all of the backup, presumably, when you pay out money.
We do, but we're not looking at their pay records. We're not looking at their employee pay records, getting to that level of detail. Sometimes we get lots of details, and I have seen instances where the same employee was being billed on 4 projects, and they were working on all 4, but it should have been a fourth, and it wasn't. So sometimes, and I'm very careful in how I say this, it's not that contractors are trying to steal money from us. They're not. It's just they're running very complex projects. So we need to add that additional oversight when we're doing all these projects to look at this data.
Does that lead to litigation?
No, because it's in the contracts up front that we have the right to audit it, and if there's errors found, what they've had in Orange, in every instance, and I've talked to one of the contractors from Orange, and he told me that he meets with the auditor and they go through and they find things and then they fix it. And then they also pay the audit fees in Orange. The contractors pay for the auditors if there are any errors made in their bills. So we're exploring it. This will come to the audit committee, and that's really the group that's going to dig into this the most. So we plan to bring it into the audit committee, and that everybody on the table there are auditors and with background in this, and have some information come in.
A lot of it is whether it's cost effective, whether you're audited, the guy you bring in as a construction auditor.
Yeah, I keep
Makes
going
sense.
back to what's happened in Orange, and they've had, in every instance, they've had enough money come back from the contractors to offset the cost, and then some. So I'm looking at Orange schools, and that's the example I'm using, and it's been very successful for them. So I don't know if we'll do it or not, but we're looking at it. I want to make sure that we can confirm to the public that we've looked at under every nook and cranny to make sure it's being done correctly. Hello.
Thank you. Mike holds his breath when I speak. Just to inform the committee that at this board meeting, when this plan was presented to us, that I requested, and Dr. Fenoy agreed, that he would work with staff to explore a career and technical education school to serve Central to North County kids. We have West now, we have South, we need North. So they are also exploring that.
Yeah. I don't think the work ever stops on the capital plan. We have pictures and time, and this is what it is on a certain day. And we're still working on it, and this plan can always be amended, and it comes to the board every year because there are always going to be changes. Okay, do you have any questions on the capital plan?
Do we need to do anything with it, or is it just a presentation?
I just always bring it into the committee, and then with the board, we'll indicate that it's gone. We've taken it to the Budget Advisory Committee, to the Construction Oversight Review Committee, now the Finance Committee. It'll go to the Sales Tax Committee. We try to make sure that you all see it, and if there's feedback, we take that and include it in the final package before it goes to the board in September.
Okay, any comments or questions? All righty, so we go to the next item then.
Okay, the
Much
next
appreciated.
one is a reimbursement agreement. Now, this is a reimbursement resolution. We've not done one of these since 2000, and I was not the treasurer when that happened, but this is a short resolution that we'll take into the school board, and what this is doing, we're getting ready for the next COPS issue that we'll be doing this year. So we are planning to borrow some money. Some of these projects are getting started before we'll issue the debt. So we'll go to the school board with a resolution to be able to reimburse ourselves. It means that we can go ahead and start spending money on some of these projects before we go to market to borrow the money. Now, I'm trying to time the debt issue so that we borrow as soon as possible, as soon as it makes sense. I don't have cash flows on all the projects. The reason this really came up on one of the projects to be funded, Verdi Elementary School, they're building a portable campus to house the students. There's not enough room on campus to hold the kids during construction. So we're going to be leasing portables, and we're putting them on land that we own out by Don Estridge that's also in Boca. So we're going to be leasing the portables and putting the infrastructure in place before we move the children, because we have to move the children out of Verdi before we can start the construction project. So I want the reimbursement resolution in place so that we can spend the COPS proceeds on that once we borrow the money. So it's a real simple, in fact, I think I left the amount blank. Yeah, the amount is still blank. What I need to put in there is the final amount for the debt issue that we're going to do. And I'll know that by the time we're adopting the budget on September 5th.
I'm not sure you need that, the dollar.
Well, the dollar amount is not how much we want to be reimbursed on, it's the amount of the debt issue itself. That's the way it's written, and I've talked to
Oh, I see, it's not the dollar amount of reimbursement.
Yeah, it's the dollar amount of the debt issue. So right now, that's $62 million is the amount of the debt issue. It could change between now and September, so I'm leaving that blank, but it's going to be the amount of the debt issue that we plan to do. And it'll go into the board. I'm hoping to take it in on September 5th, the same day as budget adoption, so the numbers would all match and line up for that day. But it's just getting permission to spend money and be able to reimburse ourselves. And as soon as we have cash flows and the projects are nailed down and we've got good numbers, we'll be coming back to you with the COPS issue, and we'll take that to the board as soon as possible. I'm hoping this is almost an insurance policy, and we put it in place, and I don't really need it, that we get the COPS issue done beforehand. But knowing they want to get started on this portable school, and it's going to take time to get that done, I want to have this in place in case.
Okay.
Leanne, are those still concretable?
No, those are, we're leasing them from an outside company, so I think they're metal portables that are coming in, and they will return them at the end. We're going to be using that portable site for the construction of Verity and Addison Meisner, so we're going to lease portables for 2 years. The concretables cost about $150,000 a piece to move them. It's very expensive to move those portables and then move them off-site.
But they're reasonable when you bought them for $50,000.
They were great when we bought them.
All right.
And if you bought them and you leave them where they're at, they're wonderful.
Hey.
But moving them are very expensive. So we can lease them for significantly less money.
Yeah.
Pretty heavy, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, they're
They
heavy.
come in with a crane and they come into
But
2
they're
pieces.
Not, you can't destruct them. I mean, with kids, you
They
need
last
to
forever,
be-
basically, they have.
Yeah, they've got a 50-year lifespan. And you can't take them on every road. There's some roads that can't support the weight of them. You can't put them out in the glades. They're so heavy they'll sink in the muck. So in this case, we're just leasing portables for those. So this is just a simple document to,
Let me ask you, is that a capital item, the temporary use of these portables?
yes,
That's what you're looking
it'll
to-
be considered as part of the construction project. It's specifically related to the project, so it'll be embedded in the project.
Okay. Just a note for those, and many of you do know this, but this resolution is a formality for tax purposes, so that you can recoup on a tax-exempt basis money that you've expended earlier than the bond issue. Okay, so anything that, after this resolution is adopted in 60 days before, and with other certain exceptions, can be financed tax exempt. That's what it's about.
Right.
But you haven't done it before, I think is kind of surprising in the last 10 years.
Well, we had money set aside in year 1 of the project. Roughly 10% of the project was funded with a different source, and then the next year we would finance it. So the prior expenditures were funded with a different source.
And they were all gone.
Right, and it was planned to do it this way. This one, we don't have that same flexibility.
Okay, so do you want us to approve?
Yes, please.
Is there a motion? Second. Any more further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Okay.
The next item is the proposed equipment lease, and this isn't a capital plan that we just looked at. We've done several leases to date. We did the first one in 2014 with, I believe it was TD Bank, to buy school buses. And then in 2015, we entered into a master lease, and we've done 3 schedules. We did 2 in 2015 and 1 in 2016. And they all have a 5-year lease. They're 5-year loans is what they really are. We actually have a list. I have a list of them that shows each one. The first one, we're actually making the final payment on August 1st. So we've borrowed, including the one we're asking about today, it would be up to $60 million. We have $10 million outstanding. We'd add $17 million more to that. But the lease we're talking about right now is to purchase and replace chillers at 25 schools. So we're working on trying to get those done. I have in here delivery for the summer before school starts. I don't think that's really going to happen. We've been working on this for a while. I think it's actually going to happen over Thanksgiving break is when they'd install them. But we're working on this. They don't fit in the capital plan. I don't want to put them in a COPS issue for a 25-year loan. Chillers don't last that long. So we're doing it's basically a 5-year loan. It's a shorter term debt issue. The par not to exceed 17 million, 17.8. I think the number's actually going to be about 16 million. The number keeps changing. Some of the chillers have had to be replaced right away, and they've used other funding sources for them. So the number keeps shifting on me. So I think it's going to be 16 million. That's one of the changes that continue to happen in the capital plan between now and September. But we're planning to take the lease to the school board at their meeting on August 15th. So I have the draft resolution, but I wanted to bring it into the committee. As we always do, it's a debt issue, so I want to bring it into the committee. But it's probably going to be 16 million, and we're estimating the rate at about 2.5%.
Yeah.
The rate will be set based on the day. If it goes to the board on August 15th, we close August 16th, and the rate would be set at that time.
Just a
David?
matter of interest, how are the leasing companies selected?
Well, when we did the first one, we put it out for
TD
bid.
up there, I
Yeah.
thought that was Toronto Dominion Bank.
Yeah,
Right.
when we did the first time, we put a bid out to everybody, all the banks that PFM knows that does leasing,
Right.
and they were the winner. When we did the master lease, we again bid that out, and what we did was put in place a master lease so that instead of having to write all the legal documents each time, we can just go to, Bank of America has the master lease. We can just go and ask them for a quote. It's very quick. We rely on PFM to tell us that we're getting a good rate, to make sure that it's a marketable rate, and then we just go with it. So it's the legal costs for cost of issuance are very small. It's just really easy to do now.
So you go through that and you use Bank of America for that. And David, you're okay on the interest rate proposed?
Yeah, we go through and review, based on the duration and so forth, and compare to other solicitations we've done recently to make sure the rates are consistent. They're usually based off of indexes, so it's a pretty quick review process.
So you've actually negotiated in a way that,
Yeah, the actual rate, the first one done a couple of years ago was a hard, here's the number. But since you've got time in between each separately scheduled, you have to look at the market at that point in time. That's what we do. We just compare it to other processes we're doing that are hard competitive bids and make sure they're consistent.
Okay, any
I mean, you have a master lease with the Bank of America, but other people could come in and propose something, and could you use the paperwork you've laid down previously?
We would start with that, but everybody has their little quirks, and so we would have to put a separate master lease in place. And that we do have, some clients have 2 or 3 master leases, and if you got to a situation where you were doing a lot of like a transit entity with buses or a rail with rail cars and things, would often have 2 or 3 master leases, so they can, just because the numbers are so large.
Right.
In this case, because the duration, the district's credit quality, the pricing doesn't vary much. The interest rate doesn't vary much from what we see in the market.
How many active leasing companies are there in the school bus business, say, for example?
It's a pretty long list. I don't remember how many responses we got when we did this RFP, but typically we would send it to 20, 30, 40 firms and get responses from 10 or so, just to give you that's a round number.
okay, well, it sounds like it's small enough
Yeah.
so that this is an efficient way to function. I gather that's how you feel.
And when the financings are this short, the cost of issuance of doing big, full processes can just eat you up. They can result in a cost of 20 or so basis points.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the proposed equipment lease?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So the sales tax financing alternatives, is this something new to the
Well,
capital
I'm going to
plan?
kick this off, and I'm going to let David talk for a while, but we're not quite ready to do the sales tax financing. We're going to do one this year, and what I'd asked PFM to do, and they did this for me, and now I'm bringing it into the committee because I think it's just good information for you to have. We are going to do a financing, so I asked, it's been a while since we've done something like that. We did commercial paper for the last sales tax, but the market has changed significantly. The cost of letters of credit to back that up are a lot higher than they used to be. So I asked them to give us an overview of the different options that are out there for sales tax. So that's what this presentation is, and we will be coming back to you. I'm working with the district staff and our program management team, which is AECOM. We've got an outside company that's helping to do the construction projects. To come up with some cash flows for us. I'm trying to determine when we need to borrow and how much. I don't think, we're going to look at a lot of different options. We could do just a bond and borrow the full amount up front and lock in today's interest rates. But there's a lot of there's a lot of changes happening when projects are happening and the scope of them. And there's still a lot of work being done nailing this down, especially for a 10-year program. So I'm leaning to something more like what we did last time, like the commercial paper, where we have the authority to borrow and we can borrow when we need to based on cash flow needs.
It sounds
But
like a line of credit or something
it could
like
be,
that.
or it could be a line of credit. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do this. So I asked PF, and I had to turn it over to David to kind of go through the different options of what's out there.
Okay. Yeah, this is, just to be clear, this is a heads up. Something's coming at some point in time, not today. So we're going to do really a flyover on this. And just as a reminder, the sales tax program is a 10-year program. You're a year and a half into it now. So if you think about financings, the longest you could do is 8.5 years, which is really pretty short. So that's one of the variables here at the end of the day. It is expected to generate at $1.3 billion, probably a little more than that at this point. Okay, I'm controlling. I'm driving now.
I think so.
All right.
See if it works.
Hey, it works. All right. Let me just quickly highlight why you need interim financing. This picture is made up, but it is what a lot of sales tax programs look like. And what we've got on there is a blue line that shows an estimate of, not an estimate, but again, a made up sample of the pace of expenses. And then we've got a straight line on there that moves across the page that is is a sample of the annual revenue. What typically happens is that all the way on the left-hand side, you see for the first year or so, typically have the revenue starts coming in, but because the programs don't get approved until just before the revenue starts coming in, you can't spend the money that quickly. You have to get contracts, you have all the things that the district has been working hard to get done. So money ends up building up in the bank. Mm-hmm. Then typically what happens is there is a mass of spending that starts. And in addition to that, school safety issues is a good example of it. Typically what happens is projects need to be done because of growth or, again, in this case, safety issues. And so all of a sudden something accelerates the need for expenses. So in this example, we showed expenses shooting up. And what that means is quite frequently, very early in the program, you've spent cumulatively more than has come in. So you got to do something, or you slow down construction, which is never an acceptable solution. And this picture just shows that. Again, the one line shows that the blue line is expenses, and as long as that cumulative expense is less than the revenue that's come in to date, you're great. You don't have to do anything. What you end up doing over time is planning out your cash flows, and the gap between the two lines is what you have to have a line of credit or something to do. And at the end of the day, we could probably stop the presentation now. You all get it, that there's something we're going to have to do. This table just highlights the things we could do. The first column is just issue some sales tax bonds. If that gap is going to be $100 million, and you're not going to be able to pay that off until towards the very end of the program, you could issue, in this case, a sales tax bond where you would pay, and I'm making up numbers just as an example, you would issue $100 million, and you would pay that off 7 years from now and 8 years from now. You can't go longer than that because sales tax stops. So that's one option. The good thing about it is you're done day one. The bad thing about it is, of course, interest rates, you're financing out the yield curves a little bit higher. The other thing is cash flows, and Leanne's hit this on the capital program in general. The expenditures, the types of projects change dramatically over time. What oftentimes happens is things get accelerated on paper, but by the time you actually write the checks monthly to the vendors, things get spread out. So on paper, you truly would need $100 million, but in reality, you may only, on a month-to-month basis, never need more than $30 or $40 million. So you have a lot of interest expense, and again, we just made up some scenarios at the bottom just to show you the magnitude. If you did traditional bonds, you could have $37 million in expenses in one scenario. Using the same spend down, if you did either a line of credit, and there's multiple options, and that's one of the key takeaways. You can go to a bank and get a line of credit. You can create a commercial paper program, which is what the district did. It's now, what, 15, almost 15, I can't believe. I had a lot more hair back then. And depending on market factors, including the cost of a letter of credit, which is required to secure it, that may be a great option. That's probably the front runner right now, is a CP program or a bank line of credit. The last column, which has been an effective tool for districts occasionally, is statutorily you're allowed to issue a revenue anticipation note, and you can roll that up to 5 years. And so if you really don't need any money till 3 or 4 years from now, maybe you would do that and use it kind of like a line of credit, but it's a fixed rate note, kind of like the TAN you issue every year. You issue a RAN for a year, and at the end of that year, you pay down if you have some extra money, or if you need a little more, you borrow a little bit more. And the point is, the whole point of this presentation is there's multiple options, and the reality of how these lines diverge or converge over time. If you're going to catch up on the expenses very quickly, you would do something very short, a line of credit with a bank or something. If it really is going to run to the end, we'll have a real healthy discussion as to whether you should just issue fixed rate debt and be done with it. So I'm going to skip all the interest rate pictures and so forth, because they are, as I said, they're just samples. The bottom line is, as the district begins to put projects out, get bids back, and refine the schedules, we will work with the district to lay the two cash flows on top of each other, the revenue coming in and the expected expenditures, and that'll really drive the final decision. You could end up using two scenarios. There might be a $30 or $40 million that you know is going to be sitting out all the way till the end of the financing, so it may make sense to just go get that and be done, and then have a very small line of credit, with a bank or something like that. So we'll be doing all that analysis. Obviously, it'll come back to you for final discussion before we actually make a recommendation, but that's about it. Again, this was really just a heads up. And if you've got questions, obviously, we'll be glad to answer.
Any questions? I've got one. I think before didn't we have a 3-year program where we were able to gain arbitrage?
We did a commercial paper program, and we did have positive arbitrage. We were able to manage the spend, and I don't have enough information yet on the cash flows to know if we can get there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of work being done. I'm actually meeting with the facilities team every Tuesday morning for 4 hours, sitting with them and listening to all the things they're doing, and as they're scoping out their work, and constantly raising my hand looking for cash flows and more data. So they're building that information. There's just a tremendous amount of work going into how to time the projects. Right now on paper, we need to borrow $86 million this year and another $70 million next year. But that's on paper. There's over $100 million in the bank for sales tax right now. So if there's a difference between when you need it on paper for budget and when the money's actually going out the door, and I'm trying to reconcile those and to get some good data. Once we have that, then and I know we'll need to do something this year. I know that's coming. So I know there's been a lot of questions. We've talked about it for a while. So I thought I'd show you what we're looking at and the thought process behind it.
Yeah.
Probably one of the keys is, and sorry I skipped over it earlier, to give everybody some comfort, is the last bullet point. If a project gets accelerated, or for some reason you need to get whatever program set up quickly, we say 90 days. If you need it quickly, it can happen faster than that. So, and typically, and I don't mean this in any way, in a negative way, typically we can get the money working with either directly with banks or with the underwriting team. We can get the money far quicker than you can figure out, even once you've decided you must get the money, far quicker than you're actually going to get a contract and get work started. So one of the things that runs around in these times of programs is oftentimes the construction, the vendors and all, saying that the financing, the lack of funds, is holding up the process, and that is rarely the case. You need the money. This group is very familiar with the speed with which you can get it done. So,
yeah. Well, the commercial paper and the line of credit seem to be a good way to do it, because you don't even have to jump at it.
Right.
And does that, for instance, the line of credit would be revolving, or the commercial paper you could go up and down with it?
But the concept we would, and again, I think it's probably I don't know, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, that the solution would be a bank line of credit or CP, because they would function the same way as long as they're set up as a revolver. And that would be the idea. Just get in, get out. If there is some positive arbitrage like there was in the prior program, you take advantage of that. With the change in tax rates, that we wouldn't expect it to be as much of a benefit as last time, but that'll be a big piece of the analysis.
Any further discussion? Okay, so this is just discussion,
Yep,
presumably. at
it's
this
just
point.
letting you know what's going on and where we're at, and I want you to understand that we're working on this.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, and at some point, we're going to bring it to you and be ready to go.
It's complicated. It's nice that you have a source to repay, and it's probably going to be more, lots of money, basically.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
guessing 150 to 200 million dollars. Last time, our line of credit was for 300 million.
Mhm.
That was a 560 million dollar sales tax. This is 1.3 billion.
Right.
But it's very different. Last time, it was all major construction projects. If I knew the day construction was going to start, I built the cash flows. We had enough history that we could put the cash flows together ourselves. This is very different because it's all renovation work. It's all fixing roofs and air conditioning and floors, and they'll take the work at a school and it'll be done over 2 years, over 2 summers. So understanding the timing of those projects, they're very complicated. You're in and out of schools constantly. So I'm still working with facilities, and they're getting closer. I mean, we're making a lot of progress. They're doing a tremendous amount of work. It's just not to the point yet that I'm ready to pull a trigger on this. So I want to make sure, as David said, finance should not be holding up any of these projects. They need to run and go do what they need to do, and then I'm watching behind the scenes to see when are we going to need cash.
As an overview, see if I'm right on this, and you can check me on it. But I think what happened last time around is you needed new school buildings or major renovations of existing
They were all
buildings.
new schools or additions or
Or
replacement
additions or
schools.
replacements. And this time around, it's because of the failure to keep up with capital requirements and expenditures to keep your properties in order.
We didn't have
that-
enough money to do it. Recession,
That
the changes in
is
the...
causing this
Yes,
sales tax, basically.
right.
Yeah.
Sales tax is all dealing with deferred maintenance. Okay, so the next item, and I'm going to take another break of talking. Mr. Burke is going to handle this one, and actually, let me pull this up as a PowerPoint instead of through board docs. So this is an update on the referendum that will be going to the voters in November. This is on the operating side as opposed to capital.
Right, good morning. Yes, and this is more on the operating side of the house. You guys typically help us out with all the financing on the capital side. And I know a couple of you, Mr. Dumars and Mr. Elmore, you may have seen this presentation at least once or twice already, so I apologize for that.
This is the new version now.
It's a little bit updated.
Oh, new version?
Yeah, we'll spice it up a little bit for you.
Are you going back to the other one?
David
But-
hasn't changed. It's just looks different.
Yeah. So the big news is last Wednesday, on July 18th, our school board formally approved a ballot question to bring forward. So we'll be making a stop by the county commission on August 14th, and then it'll show up on the ballot. It's going to be on the bottom of the ballot, and it's going to be a lengthy ballot on November 6th for the general election. We have, the sales tax was really a remedy to a problem with our capital budget. And the recession was hard on education in Florida. On the capital side, we lost 25% of our millage authority, and we were hoping that was a short-term thing, but it stayed in place. And when it got to a point in 2016, we partnered with the county and the cities and had that one-penny sales tax for government infrastructure, which is addressing that a serious issue there. On the operating side, things haven't been all that much better. And just looking back, we're getting ready. It's a campaign year, election year, so there's been a lot of talk about, well, how did education really do over the last 8 years under Governor Scott? And, you hear different things coming out of Tallahassee on the campaign trail that we've had historic funding increases and all that. So I just want to try to do a true assessment of how our funding on the operating side on a per-student basis has really changed over the last 8 years. It's highlighted in yellow there, but we were just under $6,900 when Governor Scott took office, and 8 years later, we're at about $7,400. So it's gone up about $500 per student. That's 7.37% increase, but that's over an 8-year span. So the increase per student has been less than 1% per year. And the other thing with this, when Governor Scott came in, it was in the middle of the recession. We were already at a very depressed point. So even that movement is still from a fairly low place. Florida has been falling. We're down to 44th in the country in terms of funding per student. It was 39th when Governor Scott took over. If you went back a couple years before him, we were actually at 36 in the country. And what, so we also compare our funding to inflation. This bar chart shows you the funding per student in Florida pre-recession and post-recession. You can see how things dropped as low as, 2012 was our low point. We had dropped from $7,300 to $6,200 per student, which was significant. I mean, these were hard times. And we've been climbing back out of it. But when you look where we are now, going into this 18-19 school year, the funding is $7,408 per student. So that's $102 more per kid than we had before the recession in 2007, 2008. Not much of an increase. And inflation has had an impact. So the red line there shows you what inflation has done. It's actually, I've got a newer chart that we just updated that's even higher. But even on this one, we're at least 15% or $1,100 below inflation. And if you think about the number of kids in our district, $1,100 per student, when you have 192,000 kids, that's over $200 million a year. And this chart this is the national data. The most recent data available is FY16. So some of the tax cuts that have been made at the state level I'm going to talk about haven't even played out yet in this chart. I think we're going to continue to fall, but this shows you Florida at 44th in the country as of FY16. When they look at total Florida spending, which would include grant dollars and all of that, we're at about $8,900. The national average was $11,762. So we're about 32% off the national average, or about $2,800 below the national average. Which if we were funded, if this school district was funded at the national average, which we never will be, but if we were, we'd have an additional $547 million in our operating revenue, and that's against the total operating budget of about $1.8 billion. Teacher salaries do a little bit better. They're actually ranked 36 in the country. Florida's average teacher salary is just under $49,000, and that's about 15% off the national average of $57,000. There are some new studies out that show that even Florida's position, when you consider cost of living, is actually lower than 36, because compared to some of these other states that are above us in funding, they actually have lower cost of living. And we've had an issue with our teacher salaries. The financial constraints and getting these kind of meager increases in funding each year has limited what we've been able to do in terms of salary increases. We've got this issue of what we've dubbed teacher salary compression, and that's really demonstrated in these two bar charts. You'll see when you look at our teacher workforce broken down by years of service, it's fairly even there. And we've got teachers in 5-year increments, and we do have a little more in years 1 through 5, but you can see how that plays out. But when you look at teachers based on their salary, we have an inordinate amount of teachers in the $40,000 to $45,000 range. And that's really a result of, we have continued to raise our starting salary each year throughout the recession as much as we could to stay competitive with the Tri-County area and the local market. So we had teachers that maybe 7 or 8 years ago when we hired them at about $36,000 a year. We've raised our starting salary to currently $41,000 a year. So we've got brand new teachers coming in at $41,000, and some of those folks that started 7 or 8 years ago are now, like, say, at $43,000, $44,000, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, the new guy coming in right behind me is only a couple $1,000s off the mark. It doesn't feel like you're valuing our experience. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of teachers leaving the profession. We've got teachers in the first 6 years, particularly, greater than 10% of our teachers are leaving each year. In some of those early years, it can be 15% or higher. So we do have an issue with our teacher pay. And a lot of this all goes back to our taxing authority. And, school districts are unique. If I was working at the county or a city government, that city council or county commission has much more authority on how to set their tax rate. And if they want to maintain the current tax rate and take advantage of growth in the tax roll, they can do that. A good example is the county just recently, they're going through their budget process. They have levied the same 4.78 mills for 7 years. So when the property values go up 5%, they basically have 5% more revenue to work with. That helps them address their needs, which they have a long list of needs as well, but including the sheriff's budget or whatever they have to do. School boards, on the other hand, are really, the legislature dictates what our millage rate is, and it's been a priority, particularly of the House in recent years, to roll back our millage rate. So just in the past 3 years, we've seen our required local effort reduced 0.941 mils. And that's significant. 0.941 typically doesn't sound like a big number, but when you look at that and the impact in education funding in Florida, that's taken over $1.7 billion in potential revenue off the table. And just locally to Palm Beach County, it's over $181 million, which would be about 12% of our operating revenue. So that millage reduction over the last 3 years has had a dramatic impact, and that's why we see our funding per student only going up about 1% a year, not in line with the state economy, which is growing about 4%, nowhere near what's happened with property values. So we've got some history here. You may recall that the school board back in 2010 first went to the voters to maintain a $0.25 mil of taxing authority that they had to deal with critical, at the time it could be used for either critical operating or critical capital needs. We've been using it for critical operating. And the legislature required that if school boards wanted to keep that millage, they had to go to voters in 2010. So we did that. We dedicated that $0.25 mil to supporting our fine arts, music, PE, and choice program teachers throughout our schools. Fortunately, it was passed by 66% of our voters in 2010. It was renewed in 2014 by 79% of the voters. And it's been a very good program, and I appreciate some of you that serve on that oversight committee. So we're able to track that money separately from the millage, and it's pretty cut and dry, but the oversight committee comes in once a quarter, and we show them all the teachers that are paid for out of that revenue stream, and fortunately it's been very well supported, and it's been key to helping keeping those programs in place. So now the school board, they had a big question here. It's time to go back to the voters in 2018. Just looking at our tax rates, the tax rates have fallen. This really just kind of demonstrates some of those comments I made. You can see our total millage rate. The blue piece is the capital. So you can see it dropped from 2 mils basically to the 1.5 we're currently at. The orange is the operating millage levy, and then the black piece at the top there is that $0.25 mil that the voters have supported. And as you can see, the green line represents taxable value, as that has bottomed out in 2012 and returned over the years. You can see the relationship there where our millage rates go down as the values go up. The other thing I just want to mention is that all Florida taxing authorities, city, county, school districts are under what's known as the constitutional 10 mil cap. And just to give some perspective, our millage rate for this upcoming year is going to be 6.572 mils. That's well below, 3.4 mils below the 10 mil cap. If I went back 20 years, I could show you a millage rate of school taxes. It was 9 plus mils. So these are historically low tax rates. The other question we get, say, okay, well, we know that your tax rate's down, but the value is up. So how much money are you actually collecting? What's that look like? So then here's a similar chart, but this one shows you in terms of tax collections or revenue, capital, operating, and then the voted millage levy. You can see if you went back 10 years, in 2008, we were just under about $1.2 billion in tax collections, and now 10 years later, we're just a little bit above $1.2 billion. So they're up about 3.9%, which when you consider that span of time and that we've added over 20,000 kids that we're serving, that's not much of an increase. So I think there's a pretty strong argument here that there may be some justification for asking voters to consider restoring some of that millage levy that was cut by the legislature. So the potential revenue here is the $0.25 mil is, it's a 4-year window that this is approved, and anything approved by voters automatically sunsets after 4 years. The current levy will expire at the end of this school year. So what we take to the voters in November is really for the FY19 to FY23 school year. So when you look at it, FY20, a $0.25 mil is worth about $50 million a year. a full mill is over $200 million a year. And what we are proposing is that the board, we're going to ask voters to increase that quarter mill levy to a full mill levy and generate an additional $150 million a year. We have a plan on how to use those monies. Again, it would be dedicated and there'd be oversight in place. But we have really three key components. The school safety, while we did get a little bit money, the money we did get out of the legislature this year was tied to school safety and mental health, but it's not adequate. We want to really add more police officers, add mental health professionals, make sure all of our schools are addressed, and provide them the equipment they need. We want to continue the art, music, and PE and choice teachers. That quarter mill, the revenue will grow from it over the next 4 years. So we would continue the 650 teachers we have and then also expand some of those choice programs as that quarter mill generates more money. And then 50% of the levy, $500,000 would be dedicated to improving teacher pay. And what we would like to do, and we've worked this out already, we had a task force that included our teachers union. We identified key points where we'd like to provide retention supplements to our teachers so that a teacher, once they complete 1 year of experience, they'd receive a $1,000 retention supplement. And they would get that each year from years basically after 1 through 4. Once they completed 5 years of experience, that supplement would increase to $5,000. So any teacher with 5 years of experience, basically as they're in years 5 through 9, they would get that $5,000 annual supplement. And then at 10 years and above, the supplement increases to $10,000. And supplement is a key phrase here. Our teachers, what the state has done with Best and Brightest and other programs, they've done a lot of bonuses. And those bonuses are one-time bonuses, and they don't count towards the teacher's pension benefit, with the FRS. It has nothing to do with in Florida, the retirement system is based on your 5 highest years of compensation. So any bonuses that the state's providing doesn't really help these teachers on the long run. Supplements would count, just like a degree supplement for having their master's degree counts. And we think it's responsive to our problem. We see a lot of teachers leaving after 5 years. This would give them something to hang in for, knowing that they'll start earning an additional $5,000 a year, again at 10 years. Our salaries in Palm Beach, we are by no means at the top of the state. I believe that title currently goes to Sarasota County, which has a full mill in place. So this would allow us to make our salaries very competitive, and we would be right there at the top, if not the top paying school district once you factor those in. Of course, no tax is easy, and I'm sure, this will represent, we're going from a quarter mill here to a full mill. I can't argue, if you look at what's happened over the last few years, it's really less than what was taken away. The legislature cut taxes, but the impact to the homeowner is, for every 1 mil, that's $1 for every 1,000 of taxable value. So, if it was for $100,000 of taxable value, you're basically going up $75. And I'm in Palm Beach County. We just looked recently. The average assessed value on a homesteaded property is about $280,000 or $288,000. So I think, in fairness, you'd probably have to say, on average, it's probably more like $225 to support this. But it would go a long way to addressing our operating budget, and we could really do a lot of good with the money. There's some other things on the ballot. I mentioned it's a long ballot. We've got all these Constitutional Review Commission items. This happens every 20 years. We talked about earlier, I heard about the homestead exemption going up. Fortunately, schools are exempt from that, but they're going to add potentially another $25,000 of exemption. I expect that to pass. And while that doesn't directly impact school districts, it could impact some of the services we receive. You've got the county government, and I don't want to give them any ideas because we badly need these services, but I worry when I see other cities and governments that we work with when they get squeezed because they do things like crossing guards, and we've had some good collaboration with our city police departments as of late and things like that. Amendment 2 makes the cap of 10% on non-homesteaded property assessment increase. That was in place but scheduled to expire. That would extend that. And then Amendment 5 is the one that's really got my attention. This is something that would require, going forward, any tax increase would require a 2/3 vote by both the House and Senate. And I've talked about how the legislature's been rolling back taxes. anything other than a rollback is technically considered a tax increase. So if I'm concerned with Amendment 5, if this passes, it's hard enough to get the legislature to really do anything to increase our funding. If we need a 2/3 vote to get anything other than the rollback rate, I think we're in trouble. And when you think about that long term, education is dependent on two sources, the state sales tax and local property taxes. And if you basically lock the local share at the fixed dollar amount where it is right now, and the state continues to add 20,000 kids a year or whatever, that's going to put more and more pressure on the sales tax revenue and the other state general revenue. I think they're going to be hard pressed to really keep up with the demand. They're already dealing with some shortfalls in their 3-year window, and I think it's being sold as, this is a way to protect the legacy of tax cuts, but I feel like it's short-sighted and that it's not really in the best interest of the state. If you continue to devalue education, the economy is ultimately going to pay the price. So anyway, I may be getting a little off. Maybe that's too much commentary, but here's...
No, not at all.
Okay. Here's our ballot language. This is what will go to the voters, and it's pretty straightforward. It's similar to what we've done in the past. It just expands that in addition to those teachers for the choice programs and fine arts, we'd had safety. Some of that is equipment for the officers. They need body armor and shields and helmets and vehicles. The mental health, so think about the millage. We've got a full mill here now. We've kind of broken it down. We want to dedicate a $0.25 to the safety aspects. So that's police, mental health. The mental health piece is just as important as the security piece, and that's where we really have virtually no funding currently in place. And so that $0.25 is $50 million. We'll spend about $25 million on security and $25 million on mental health. And I know those are big numbers, but we are a big district. Just to put one mental health professional in every school will cost you over $14 million. Continue the fine arts, which we all know about, and then I talked about the teacher pay. So, we're going to be working hard to get the community educated on this in the months ahead, and we appreciate, anything you guys can do to help inform the public as well. That's it, Ms. Evans.
Does anybody have questions on this?
Question on more of a sidebar. I don't know if you've analyzed what they're talking about, changing the impact fee structure, away from homes, more to, office buildings, and what the impact could be on your allocation of impact fees, 5-10 years into the future.
I haven't heard that. I guess that's a fairly new
I haven't
thing.
heard that yet.
We were aware of, our impact fees have been fairly stagnant for a number of years, and when you look across the state, Palm Beach are relatively low. I know there was some proposal to start phasing in an increase, but it was more the traditional manner.
There's a very little increase on residential, but on commercial properties, it's like that's where all the increase in impact's going to be. And I don't know with how the allocations to school district. You may want to put that on your list.
Yeah,
you don't have anything to do, Mike. But
but Chris Garrison and our staff follows that stuff.
The school impact fee, it's very specific on the homes that are built and based on the student generation rate and how many students would be in each home. So the impact fees on the buildings, I bet, has to do with security and roads.
Right.
I bet it doesn't impact schools at all. Each one has a separate calculation, but I'll confirm that.
But if the percentage shifts from homes to the way they're talking about more to the commercial side, then the impact fee to homes is going to be much less. And I think indirectly you're going to see less of the allocation of impact fees. Now, you may not impact you at all for the reasons you talked about. I don't know, but you just may want to take a look at that, Mike.
I'll follow up with Chris Garrison and find out. I hadn't heard
that will go through like under the radar, and then it's just going to go. I don't know what the time is.
It's a county study. It's been going on for 2 years. And basically, the present draft of it, I think homes are reduced on the impact fee by 30%. And if you're in a nursing home or a service station, your impact fee goes up 400%. So it's something.
Okay, we'll check it out, because the version I saw, I thought, had a a pretty steady increase.
Well, we were
to
just
the
looking at the school
single-family homes.
piece. We were just
Oh,
looking-
just school taxes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to,
So we need to look at
we'll
the
check
rest
on
of
that.
it.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Parts that-
Moving parts there, and they're still studying it, it's still in study, so.
So if you want to put I mean, if, you know, see how it is, but if you guys are going to get negatively impacted, you may want to have some discussions with the county on that, but.
Okay, thanks for
Question
letting us know
for
about
you.
that.
We see where the lack of value put on education here by the state, at least in terms of economic support. What's our ranking in the terms of 50 on quality of education?
The Florida outperforms, I mean, despite the kind of really low funding, and there's different reports that came out. I think we got we were ranked like a C in academic performance, but we got like a D or F in the funding.
And funding.
And there is a strong correlation between funding, and performance. You know, if you look at Massachusetts, it's the highest performing state academically,
Right.
and it's also one of the highest funded, systems. And New York, I think, is the highest, New York State. But we outperform our funding a little bit. And Florida is big on accountability. We do, Ms. McQueen could speak to this better to me, but there's tons of testing, tons of accountability, and just not a lot of money. But I could probably send some information back to the committee that'll give you some of those rankings as far as how we do in math and reading.
Has it maintained itself, or is it going up or down?
Funding's gone down.
That's what the funding-
Performance has gone up a little bit. Graduation rates are improved.
90%.
But, I think Ms. McQuinn's, like Brett.
I'm educating, not advocating.
Okay.
I think for me, it was a very tough vote. For me, looking beyond the state of Florida, because every state has its high-performing districts and average and low-performing. We're Palm Beach County. We're not the state of Florida. And there are many who say, well, Florida. By the way, educated all of Florida, all of my life. I think when you look at, we are Palm Beach County, and we're going to fund the education of our kids. We are the people who own homes and businesses, and I just think it's very important that we focus on the fact that we are not willing to settle for being at the bottom of any list. And in terms of teachers, and having been a principal and polling many principals when I was campaigning for this position, what do you need? If we are unwilling to put the cream of the crop of teachers in front of our kids, we're not going to educate our kids.
Our district recently, we compare ourselves to, there's 7 what we consider urban districts in the state, large districts. We did get the highest performing, we got the highest scores on all the latest round of state testing. So our students, we are outperforming our comparative districts in the state. I think the other thing I just want to stress too is,
Well, I don't know, are we at the sea level too, or, the state's at the sea level, and where are we as far as our performance?
I think we're a little better because Palm Beach is on the higher end of the spectrum within the state. And I would attribute some of that to the quarter mill that's been in place and what we've done locally. We've kept some of those programs in place, the fine arts and all that, that do provide students a little bit more well-rounded education. And if you just followed the leadership in our state, those programs would probably be gone, and all we'd focus on is testing and core academics. And anyway.
Can I say one more? Okay, one more thing. This is to the testing, which makes me crazy. The amount of money that the state requires us to spend on the FSA, can't remember what's on the FSA, the preparation, the money that we spend just on the preparation for testing, that is a Florida test. It's not a national test. If you look at our private schools, now our charter schools have to do that. Our private schools do not. You won't find a private school in Palm Beach County that gives a state test. So there is no time wasted on performing to a state test. The kids, when they're sophomores, juniors, they'll take the SAT. In the meantime, their teachers are losing 0 instructional time to preparing for a state test. So why do they outperform many of our wealthier private schools? Why do they outperform our public schools? Let's even put aside that they would accept all spectrum of kids. The fact is, they don't waste time preparing for a state test. Little fanatic about this.
Hey, Mike, question. I see non-charter district.
Yes.
What's that mean?
So this was a topic of great debate, but what this means is it's very specific to the voter that these funds will not be going to charter schools. This is solely for the district-operated traditional public schools. And that's the same language we had with the sales tax and also with the quarter mill. You know, we've had some debate. There's been some, we may face a challenge on this, but we've worked with our outside counsel to make sure we're on solid ground.
Well, I know years ago they tried to make this district a non-charter district. They never did that?
No, we were actually charter has different meanings. For a while that we were a charter district, which gave us flexibility on some of our construction and some of the things we did.
Yeah.
That program has run its course, but we are, you don't have a choice. Every school district in Florida has to accept charter schools. And the legislation over the years has become more and more supportive of charter schools. You may have read in the paper this amendment, I believe it's Amendment 8, that's on the ballot for November, that's been challenged by the League of Women Voters, because when you read the ballot language, it talks about term limits for school board members. It talks about requiring a civics class for high school kids, I believe, which we already do. And then it talks about that public schools can be formed basically by going directly to the state. And so it doesn't really explain real well, but what that means is charter schools can now, if this passes, they won't have to go through the local school board. They can go straight to the state and get approval to open up wherever they like.
It's the same thing with the term limits?
It's mixed in with It's mixed in with the term limits, which polls very strong.
Same voting item.
And it's confusing.
Everybody's going to go for term limits, so.
Yeah. They do that stuff,
Right.
you know.
So there's a challenge right now in the court. The League of Women Voters felt like it was misleading
More
and
than one topic,
confusing. And
too
there's
many topics.
3 topics mixed in there, and it seems like they mixed in a couple they felt like would be very popular with what they're really trying to get passed.
Did the Constitution Commission put this 8
Yes.
on?
Yeah.
But the Constitution Review Commission every 20 years, and it's appointed by the governor and the Speaker of the House and the people who are in charge. So it's an opportunity for them to really get things done that maybe they couldn't pass in a regular legislative session. They take it to the voters. Those items do require 60% approval for anything to amend the Constitution. Our question is the typical 50% plus 1 approval threshold.
You're 50%.
We're 50.
And that's 60%.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What percent? How many percent students are in charter schools in this district?
In this district, it's just under 11%. We got about 20,000 students in charter schools.
So you're not going to get their vote?
Likely not. No.
Okay,
no.
all right. Just so you know. Okay. All right.
When it comes to attracting corporations and businesses coming to Florida and providing jobs, when they look at how much we've lost in the education system, do you have any idea what the impact has been?
No, I'm sorry. I mean, that would be one to research a little bit. And I know Ms. Smallridge and the BDB work hard to keep attracting businesses, but I have heard anecdotally, I did a presentation for the BDB, their C-suite, and I heard it anecdotally from the gentleman from Max Blanc, I believe, or Scripps and different companies saying that when they're trying to recruit scientists and people from around the globe, the number one concern was with the schools for their kids, because these people tend to, maybe they'll be here for a couple of years and then move back to England or wherever. They do like the IB programs, which we offer, because they feel like that way they know they're kind of keeping up with the standards and they can be more mobile. But I think
it's just a question that you would wonder.
Yeah, we work hard, to market our schools. We do have the choice programs have been very successful, and we want to keep growing on that. But certainly do better, and this money is going to be critical to it. If it does not pass, then we're in a really tough spot because we just lost $50 million a year, and that pays for 650 teachers, and we would face some very serious budget cuts going into next school year.
What kind of advertising campaign on this is there?
So we're going to have to do more than we've done in the past. This is a heavier lift to actually, whether to continue in a quarter mil is a much easier question to ask than actually to increase it. And we are going to dedicate some money to this. We had received some money from the BP oil spill settlement a few years back. It was kind of one-time money that we've been saving. So I think, I've talked to the board a little bit. We're probably going to have to spend about at least $300,000, maybe as much as $500,000 to educate the community. There's going to be probably a private group that'll form. Our teachers, of course, they're very supportive. The PTA, we'd like to get them involved. So there'll probably be a district educational effort, and we're very limited in what we can do. And then we're hopeful maybe the private group that can maybe do advocacy and see what type they'll be trying to raise money to help get the word out.
Yeah, maybe we can use some of those settlement proceeds instead of for the Christmas party.
That's right.
No, not that we're not going to have it, but the extra one.
Right.
A much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions on this?
Well, that's terrific. And what's the prognosis for its passage?
It should, it can pass. There's support. There's support. No, I gotta choose my words better. No, it's actually there was some outside polling that was done. The newspaper actually ran the results in the Palm Beach Post, so it's public now. But the ballot language was tested. At first read, 59% of people supported it, and then I guess the way they do it, they'll go back and say, well, what if I told you, this will allow us to pay teachers more and provide more police and all that. And at the end of that questioning, the approval rate was at 68%. So that means it's winnable. We don't know what type of opposition we may face. It is a tax. A lot of people are going to say, hey, this is a tax increase. They keep saying we're trying to quadruple the tax, from the quarter mil to the full mil. I'd like people to keep it in context with what our taxes have done as a whole, and how they've gone down in recent years. But we need to fight to hold on to that support. And I think if we can get the word out and at least inform people so that they understand what it is and the context we're in within Florida and why it's necessary. The state has really kind of abdicated their responsibility and pushed it down to the local boards. The state's going to say, look, we're going to cut taxes every year. You guys want to do something different, you take it to your voters. And we're not alone in this. You're seeing more and more referendums pop up. Miami-Dade, Broward, Martin to our north. Orange County's had the 1 mil in place for several years. They're going back to renew it. So I think you're going to see more and more of this where the local boards have to step in and take a referendum because we can't rely on the legislature to provide the funding.
Mike, now, obviously, with the sales tax, the last sales tax increase, we got the half-cent of our component. That was for a specific timetable, and it's oversight. This time, again, you're only going for 4 years. So what happens in year 5? You're almost going to have to go back again.
Right.
Yep.
Because you're going to be on this like this is a funding source. So
yeah, I mean, it automatically expires. But the way we'll reevaluate in 4 years, but we'd probably be back in front of voters at 2022. Now, at that point, if the funding has gotten better, maybe if we don't need a full mill, we could get by with a half or whatever, we can look at that. But if things stay on the trend they're on and they continue to reduce school taxes at the state level, we may need to just to renew it. But we'll have that oversight in place. We'll show where the money's going. These things, I'm sure we are tying it now to teacher compensation, so we're not going to want to take away those supplements after 4 years. Okay, thanks. Yes.
One more tiny one. The comment, I think, as we're out educating, The question was, in terms of our funding, how are we in terms of academics? And you said that our academics outperform our funding. I think that's an important statement.
I agree, and I appreciate the questions because this presentation needs work as we spread the word to the community. This was kind of my initial one to try to really talk about the tax mechanics, but that needs to be part of our message and just show people that kind of what they've had in terms of return on investment initially and how this, it's a great
Like
point.
you said, you're the A-rated urban district, and you want to keep it that way, and it's the only way you're going to be able to keep it is to fund the teacher salaries. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of research that supports that an experienced teacher is more effective in the classroom, and the teacher is the single most important thing in terms of student performance. And we've got the numbers to show we're losing way too many teachers. The pipeline for recruiting teachers is drying up. There's fewer and fewer coming out of the colleges and universities. So we need to take care of the ones we have and try to get them to stick around.
Okay,
Presentation.
Thank you.
so I think that's it. Anything else?
I have a
Any other
couple of
comments?
follow-up questions
Okay.
I want to make sure. One is, I want to make sure you all picked up your new badge at the security desk. If you didn't, okay, if you got it, you're good. If not, make sure you pick that up before you leave today.
Okay.
I also wanted to just poll the group. We had this meeting start at 9 because I had to reschedule it, and it's summertime, and we started at 9. What do you all think about 9 o'clock as opposed to 8 o'clock meetings going forward?
Could we find
Maybe a
parking
meeting.
spaces easier?
Yeah.
I mean, at 8 o'clock, I can park out front. 9 o'clock, I have to park in the back 40.
8's okay with us, with me. I don't know about anybody.
It's fine with me, but
Okay.
9's okay.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, we'll stick with 8. And
Bill's got a question.
Well, one document indicated the next meeting is August 24th, and the other one.
yeah, the August 24th that was from the minutes. This replaced the August 24th meeting. So the next meeting is September 25th, and that would be from 8 till 9:30. It'll be a little shorter meeting because we have the students come in for the tan sale right after that.
That's the sale.
So it is September 25th. I adjusted your calendar, the calendar invites, and on your agenda, the back page of your agenda has the dates going out through 2019. And I think I fixed that one and took the August meeting off, but we don't need the August meeting. Okay?
I'm gonna try to get another
That was my
folder.
next thing to bring up. So that's all I have for you. Again, I appreciate you all coming in today
Okay,
and all
if
your feedback.
there's no further, we'll adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah.